The key ingredients in the art of working together are how to deal with change, how to deal with conflict, and how to reach our potential. The needs of the team are best met when we meet the needs of individual persons. That's a quote by Max Dupree. The most effective teams are those that take into account the individual and engage the individual at a high level in teamwork. This is possible because each individual is thoroughly committed to the work. When this is the case, this allows each individual to stretch and to accomplish much more than is possible if they were working alone. The team model is what makes this possible. It's the guide that allows this to happen. Why should you care about the team model? The reason is because you want your team to reach its goals. This will help you be able to do that. When you're aware of the key ingredients and key stages of teamwork, this will help you from the very start to engineer and design a team model that will work for you, that will be effective for you. We're going to today, first of all, take a look at these key ingredients. Sheila and David Weber identified 3 key ingredients for teamwork: trust, identity, and process. I think it makes a lot more sense to call these cooperation, identity, and process. What you really have to have is cooperation. We're going to take a look at this first key element, or key ingredient, cooperation. I want you to just think for a moment about the challenge that cooperation truly is. Ken Blanchard, in his book about high-performing teams, talks about the fact that if you have 4 people, you have 11 subgroups. What if you have 8 people? Then you have potentially 247 subgroups. That's a lot of complexity that has to be managed if that team is to move forward. Here's another point to consider. Leading teams is a lot different than leading individuals. This there's evidence for this in an article that came out recently in the Journal of Business Psychology. They did a research study that involved 60 R&D teams. They looked at transformational leadership, and they verified this. Not only that, but this study showed that these teams, the most effective teams, were those that had shared knowledge, where the teams worked together that way, and where the team leader had a relationship with each and every member of that team so that each one felt important and needed by the team. Team members need to be able to respect each other and be able to overcome and work out problems. And each team member needs to have a goal specifically that he or she can implement. Probably the most important ingredient of cooperation is to have a positive attitudes and good morale. Positive attitudes, good morale. This is the most important thing. They did a study in Team Performance Journal, Team Performance Management Journal, and they had evidence that showed some very interesting things. It showed that when you get a team together and you can create a protective effect at the beginning, and the way you can do this is by having a lot of individual positive emotions and having a lot of team engagement. So there really is something to this, really setting the team up for success at the very beginning. The more good relationships you have among team members, the better their performance will be. Now, I'd like for us to take a look at this second key ingredient, identity. What's this all about? This is about tying the work to a person's individual identity so that you can get the person connected to the work, so that there's a congruence between the individual team member and the team and the organization. That's really important. The good news for leaders is that this identity can be changed and it can be shaped by the leader. That's very exciting. I'm going to give you an example that will demonstrate the power of this second key ingredient, identity. This is not a business example, but it's so good at illustrating this point, I just have to share it with you. This happened during a summer youth program in Philadelphia in 1984. What happened is that the mayor at the time was facing a terrible dilemma, a terrible problem. Graffiti was just springing up all over the city, taking over. It was like an explosion. The problem with this is that graffiti was tied into or linked to drugs and alcohol, and really these teens were just headed downhill. They were going to end up in jail or dead at a young age, and they were never going to be employable. It was a bad situation, and the city looked bad, and he had to do something about it. He brought in a special person to help him with this. Her name was Jane Golden. She called a meeting of these teens and got them together, and she made them a proposal. She said, here's what the city will do. We'll give you art materials, we'll provide you with structure and training, we'll even pay you to paint murals. But there's a catch. You cannot put any profanity or anything inflammatory in the mural, and it has to be positive. It has to be something uplifting. Other than that, you can do whatever you want. And guess what? They bought it. They went for it. This turned out to be a huge success. One example of what happened was that they had this project to repaint the Spring Garden Street Bridge in Philadelphia. They only had 3 weeks for this project. It had graffiti on both sides of it. I mean, it looked terrible. But they got busy and they got it done. And the community was so impressed, they just applauded their work. I mean, this was amazing, how the change in what the city was starting to look like. Jane Golden was so successful with this program that they went on to paint over 2,000 murals. And they eventually extended this from a 6-week program to more of a longer-term program. The reason this worked was because she was able to tap into their personal identity and link that to these projects, these mural projects. If this was possible with a group of hopeless teens, just think how much more effective a little bit of leadership can be in your organization to help your teams. The third key element, or key ingredient, is process. The process of teamwork is all about having open communication, about having constructive conflict and productive conflict resolution. This is what it's all about. If this is to happen, the team has to progress through certain stages. It doesn't just happen automatically or magically. I mean, there's a process involved. really what's helpful is to have a model as a guide for teamwork. I'm going to talk about an example from Team Performance Management Journal. This example is about a team that did not use a team model. This involved 10 city groups of a European municipality. The organization was in trouble. They just could not really do what they were trying to do. Nothing was working. So they completely reorganized and restructured the organization. People really wanted to work together on a team, but the organization just was not able to produce teams. They were missing some key elements. They did not have the leadership to facilitate the teamwork. They did not even have a space created for the teamwork to happen. There has to be a mechanism for it to happen. This organization really would have benefited from taking advantage of the team model concept. Can you think of a situation where management really wanted teamwork to happen, but it just didn't materialize? Raise your hands. There probably was not a team model that was used. I'm going to share with you now 4 different models for teamwork. The last one is my model, what I think would be useful for teamwork. I just want you to keep in mind, however, that the model that you use for your team, for your particular situation, that's going to vary depending on exactly what your goals are and what your team is trying to accomplish. These ideas will be a starting point to help you start thinking about it, though. Okay, let's look at this first model. You're probably all familiar with it. It's the original team model that was produced by Dr. Bruce Tuckman in 1965. It had the stages forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. It turned out this was really not what usually happens in organizations, but it definitely did contribute to the field. There's some more recent models that I'm going to talk about next. This next one is Ken Blanchard's model. He talks about this model in his book, The 1 Minute Manager Builds High-Performing Teams. Traditionally, management would approach team leadership in one of 2 ways, either by being autocratic or really super dictatorial, or by being democratic. There was problems with both of these. If you're too dictatorial, you're going to stifle out the creativity and the ingenuity of that team. That's not good. On the other hand, if you're very democratic and you invite a lot of input, what can happen is that there's no direction at critical points of teamwork where you really do need a leader to help get that team on track. Blanchard solves this problem by having the team leader to change roles and change leadership styles at different stages of this process. That can be really difficult to do. When you can do it, you're going to have a much richer team altogether because more people are going to be able to contribute more to the team. Let's take a look at his model. This first stage is orientation. This is where the leader steps in and very strong and tells the team what the purpose is so that they're very clear about it. In his model, the leader has to be very strong in the first stage. He can't come out strong in the second or third stage, because if he does, people are going to resent it. They're just not going to like it. It's not going to go over well. The second stage is the dissatisfaction stage. This is kind of an adolescent stage. It's a situation where people are not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. There's a discrepancy between expectations and reality. There can be a lot of confusion and frustration. It's just kind of chaotic. During this stage, the leader will help the team and be directive, and at the same time really boost people up and say, you know, you can do it, and help them to keep going. Then, because this is really a necessary stage of the process, it doesn't really mean there's problems just because people are uncomfortable. This third stage is integration. At this point, the leader will simply try to provide resources for team members and help them to be able to share responsibility to move the project along. And if things have gone according to plan by the production stage, that team leader has been able to step back and just be another member of the team, equal member of the team, if things have gone well. This process is kind of flexible in that if you go to the second stage and you realize it's not working out, you can go back to the first stage. But you can't go from the third stage back to the first stage. That won't work. So it really is a process that he's identified here. There's a few things I like about it. I like the fact that he places as much emphasis on the process as he does on the content. For example, one time he had a team that was really just bogged down. They couldn't get anywhere. What they did is they had one of their team members to simply observe one of their team meetings. And what he discovered was that they were interrupting each other over 40 times during a single meeting. When he reported this back, team members were able to step back, really focus on listening to each other, and then the team was able to move forward. Another thing I like about Blanchard's model is that he doesn't make any bones about it. He talks about this second stage being dissatisfaction. It's uncomfortable, and I like that. I like that he spells out how it's going. There's some definite features I like about his model, but at the same time, for a lot of situations, it's too oversimplified, and you're going to need to put in some other stages and some other ingredients to be able to have it work out the way you want it to. Okay, let's look at this third model. This is the Weber and Weber model. Unlike the original model that Tuckman introduced, where in the real world, what really happens is the leader is the person that selects the team, and they have the building process, kind of like the forming stage. That's what happens initially. Deadlines and time limitations are laid out pretty clearly, and then they have the launching phase. In this phase, the vision and goals become very clear. That everyone knows what their milestones are and what their deliverables have. After that is the collaborating stage. What is important to think about in terms of collaboration is that someone needs to facilitate this, usually, because what can happen is that team members are only going to bring up things they know they already agree on. Nobody wants to have a conflict or confrontation. But if you have a facilitator, that can help to get different information out there. This will help that team to have a much deeper, richer experience of creating and a creative process that will work for the team. After the collaboration stage, what happens in the Weber and Weber model is that performing and evaluating happen over and over until they're satisfied with the result and there's a conclusion. What happens if the team gets stuck and things are not really working? Well, in the Weber model, what can happen is that there's an intervention, there's actions that can be taken, such as having some feedback and reflection take place, maybe relaunching the teamwork. You could bring someone up in there from higher management to help lead the way, or you could even bring in clients to point out issues that you might not have thought of. It's very important in this model that the result is intertwined with self-expression, so that when each individual succeeds, the whole team succeeds. They really put less of an emphasis on protocol and a lot more of an emphasis on working together and just getting the job done. Now I'm going to talk about what I think would be a good model for teamwork. The Taylor model. I would divide this into two key sections, the prerequisites and then the usual stages. I think that there's a whole lot of value really in this prerequisite part of setting the stage, getting things set up so that team can win and can perform well. This first prerequisite is about selecting the team, and the team leader needs to of course pick people that have expertise, and also I think consider that the specific people that will be working together and how well and how willing they will be to work together. That's really important. And then of course it's also important in this very first prerequisite to have a clear vision and know what the goals are of the team. Then there's this second prerequisite, which is the launch meeting. And in this launch meeting, this is where the team leader further clarifies the purpose of the team, makes a compelling case for teamwork, and motivates that team and gets everyone excited about the prospect of working together. This is where it's possible to create this protective energy that I talked about earlier, that this research study showed worked. And I think that's a really great idea to help prepare people for teamwork, because what will happen later is that it'll be like a roller coaster ride. There will be highs and lows. And when you have this perception of viability created at the beginning, that really will carry that team through to high performance. After this, there are the stages, which happen in kind of an iterative process, similar to what happened in the Weber and Weber model. I'm going to talk about one of the key stages now, probably the essence of it, which is collaborating. I view this a little bit differently than Blanchard did in his model, because I don't think that it's possible to do this once. I think that for each and every aspect of the teamwork, what has to happen is that disparate information has to be considered, and then after that it has to be integrated together. The team has to agree on things before they can move forward. How do you get to this point of integration? Well, first people have to understand each other. Somehow you have to make that happen. There's a lot of different tools you can use to help with integration. For instance, lateral thinking, which is the opposite of linear thinking. And there's the devil's advocate approach, which will often bring up facts that otherwise you wouldn't think about, you'd omit. Whatever you do, the important thing is to get together on it, because you have to be able to go forward. The key stages here for each and every aspect are collaborating, performing, and evaluating. And here's the overall view of this. And again, for every single aspect that you have, you need to do this. You need to have the collaboration, the performing, and the evaluating. And then link the components together to produce the product that you produce of teamwork, whatever the product is. I believe it can be very useful for you and your team to identify a model that you can use as a guide to help you get through teamwork. Why is this helpful? Well, it's helpful because team members will have some idea what to expect. They won't be surprised by upsetting things that happen along the way. It will really give people a boost and help people persevere and make it through the tough times. Team dynamics work best when the team takes advantage of key ingredients and stages. The key ingredients for teamwork are cooperation, identity, and process. The key stages make up the model for teamwork. When you work on a team, it's important to choose the right model for teamwork. When you do so, you'll be able to deal with change, cope with conflict, and make the most of each individual's contribution.